Welcome back to the Erica Show. I'm your host, Erica Kang, and the guest of episode 51 of the Erica Show is Pruden from Aleo. I met Alex in East Denver, and he is definitely one of the most pleasant findings on my out of my Denver trip. So I'm super happy to have him on board and on the Erica Show. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Erica. And it's a very flattering to hear you give that intro. East Denver is obviously a special conference with a lot of interesting people. So again, very flattered and proud to be here.
No, I was just sitting right next to you, and you just you had all these achievements, accomplishments, and your journey was just amazing to just hear in one sentence. So I'm just really happy to hear more today, and that's why I just really wanted to have you on board. But yeah, let's get straight into it. Can you just do a brief intro of who you are and what you do in this space?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alex Pruden. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer of a company called Aleo. And Aleo is basically a new layer one protocol for deploying private applications. So think of something like Zcash, which has at least in its prior incarnation kind of enabled private money. Aleo is kind of aiming to bring that same paradigm, but expand it a little bit and enable private applications using zero knowledge cryptography.
So that's why you were at the Zcash gathering. I think yes. The article said that it was kind of like a baby of Zcash. I don't know. It's called kind of right?
Yeah. So the way I describe it a lot of times is if Zcash and Ethereum had a baby, right? Because Zcash, obviously has the privacy, or you can really look at Zcash as an extension of Bitcoin and Ethereum as an extension of Bitcoin in different directions, right? Yeah. Ethereum basically expanded Bitcoin in the direction of programmability, Zcash and privacy. And so the combination of the two is kind of how we frame it ourselves in Aleo. And also, I think there's an important intellectual lineage from Zcash, because one of the co-authors of the paper that Aleo is based on is actually works at Zcash and is a researcher there, Sean Bowe.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, you have that family connection there, so that's great. Let's go step back and go focus more on you first, and then I can go into Aleo. But yeah, I mean, I was very curious about. I want to hear more about your journey into crypto, and you were into the Stanford group as well, which I am a part of as well. So I'm just really, I want to hear all that journey. Can you explain further and how you got into the space too?
Yeah, sure. I can rewind and take you all the way back. So I started my career not in crypto or blockchain or tech or anything. I was in the U.S. Army.
Yes.
I joined after 9/11. I have a family military background. It kind of felt like at the time as a junior in high school, it seemed like a good thing to do to serve the country given the moment. And I ended up having a career in the U.S. Army after I graduated college for 9 years. And the last year of that time, I was an Army Special Forces officer. We were working to train the Syrian rebels. And they were fighting both the Assad regime as well as ISIS. And kind of, so that was what I was doing. I was based in Turkey, and kind of as part of that work, I was around a lot of people who had become refugees from the conflict, or as a result of the conflict. And we're kind of based in refugee camps, and through conversations with several of them, I realized that of course, the Syrian civil war is an enormous humanitarian tragedy. But one of the things I didn't realize before talking to these folks is the amount of wealth that was just destroyed overnight as a result of these people really not being able to take what they had earned over the course of their lives with them when they fled from Syria. Because a lot of these people I kind of would interact with, came from pretty upper class Syrian society, well-to-do backgrounds, professional classes, lawyers, doctors, etc. And, when the Civil War came, they had to flee often kind of hastily. And, in a place like Syria, unlike in the US where we have dollars, you kind of know you can get dollars out anywhere in the world. Like Syrians, if the money in their bank account, it's kind of hard to access outside of that country. And so, or the money is tied up in property or other stuff. So bottom line is people who had to flee that conflict quickly just in order to save their lives ended up being in poverty, despite the fact that they'd played by the rules and done everything right their whole lives. And I learned about Bitcoin kind of in this context. And what really struck me about it was this concept of, or this kind of meme that it's like your bank account, but in your head. you like memorize like a brain wallet, the concept of a brain wallet, you seed phrase or a private key, you just memorize, and that's your money goes with you anywhere. It doesn't matter how quickly you need to cross a border or anything. And that was, to me, what really excited me about the technology and inspired me to want to really get into it. So I left the Army just after that deployment. And I wanted to get into crypto. I had, a benefit that you get as a U.S. military veteran is something called the GI Bill to go to school and study anything, and the government will pay for it. So I was fortunate to get into Stanford. My MBA, and I was pursuing an MBA and kind of moonlighting in the computer science school, taking classes I really had no business being in, but just because I was interested in cryptography and everything relating to blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And yeah, as part of that, as you mentioned, I helped start what at the time was called the Stanford Blockchain Collective.
Okay.
Because there's two clubs, actually history here. There was two crypto clubs at Stanford for a little while. There was the Stanford Blockchain Collective, which I helped start, which was an interdisciplinary club between engineering, law, and business. And then there was another club called the Stanford Bitcoin Club, which was more or less limited to a handful of PhDs or master's students in the computer science department. So these two things coexisted for a year, and then they ended up merging into what is now called the Stanford Blockchain Club. And so that was, so now that's sort of how that all happened. But anyway, so I was at Stanford. It was 2017, so ICOs and the space was kind of taking off. I got a job in venture capital, working first at GGV Capital, which is a prominent kind of like US based / China based venture fund. They were looking to get into the space. So I was an analyst for them. I then worked at Coinbase for a little while for Emily Choi, who's now the president of Coinbase. And that was fun. And then I was going to go back to that role. That was an internship between my first and second year. I was going to go back to that for a full-time role, but I ended up getting recruited and brought on by A16Z, specifically Katie Hahn, who had just joined as a general partner there. She, of course, just announced her new fund outside of A16Z. But I know, big moment for her. I went to work for her for a couple of years before joining Aleo. So anyway, that's my full story.
Wow, what a story. See, like I always do this, like going backtrack and then have you guys like explain like your crypto rabbit hole stories, but like it's always amazing. I think it really gives them inspiration, like people who want to get into space but really are hesitant to get into it because it's kind of complicated and stuff. But yeah, I really loved your story. Oh my gosh.
Well, the two things, I guess, like my quick two statements is one of the things I love about this space is it's so new. Is there's no preconceived notion of like what a qualified person is in the industry, right? There's like 100%. you can come from anywhere. You can be educated, you can not be educated. And it's just and honestly, I've seen so many incredibly smart people with amazing profile with amazing profiles that like in a traditional industry might get overlooked because they don't have the credentials that the industry is looking for. But this is so new, like no one has the credentials. So it's actually the best place to break in if you kind of are on the outside track, in my opinion. So
100%. We all start from a clean slate, right? I think that's totally like the beauty of crypto, that everyone on ground zero.
Yeah. And it's intimidating. Like, I mean, there's so much to it, right? There's so many aspects from the economics of it to the cryptography, to the networking, like, all kinds of multiple computer science disciplines just alone. But, you'd be amazed. I mean, I think, again, I think I still feel like a beginner every day, but I will say that I've seen and myself learned that if you just spend a little bit of time digging in and like getting into concepts and educating yourself, it's amazing how far you can go in just a short amount of time. So anyway, hopefully that's some encouragement to your listeners.
100%. This is great. For me, I'm just inspired. Let's talk more about cryptography and ZK tech, because it seems like zero knowledge tech is really getting a lot of traction these days. More and more so, and people are feeling the importance of it. How did you get, infatuated with cryptography, and like, why does zero knowledge tech matter? Can you just do a kind of a general like background talk about that?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess maybe I'll take the second part or the first part first, and then I'll get into ZK. So I got into cryptography at Stanford. I took a class taught by a professor named Dan Benet, who's, he's a, very accomplished. Yeah. He's a very, very accomplished cryptographer. And it's actually very, I think, amazing that he still teaches classes, because of course he's kind of, he's made it. But anyway, his class really inspired in me like an interest in the space. And that's actually where I first learned about zero knowledge cryptography. And some of the techniques that we apply at Aleo were based out of research that I was reading as part of that class. So, so that's how I got into it. I think, why does it matter? I think it solves, put it most succinctly, it solves a conundrum that comes up in the digital world all the time, which is this: how do you verify the authenticity of something without revealing its contents, right? Without understanding its contents, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of the simple analogy I like to use here is like, imagine we're playing poker, and it's kind of the end and it's time to show what we have. And if we didn't, like, the only way for me to show you that if I say I have 4 of a kind, right? You're like, okay, really? Let me see the hand, right? And I have to show you my hand. And you see, and then you can see it, right? And, and so you have to physically verify that, like, by seeing the contents of my hand, whether or not it's a valid hand. Mm-hmm. And so there's, of course, if again, this poker is kind of a contrived example, but imagine this is something where there's some kind of business contract, or there's aspects of the information that you want to not reveal to anyone for some reason. The other party can't verify its authenticity. So you either have to reveal it, or you can and prove its authenticity, or you have to keep it private and leave people in doubt. And what zero knowledge cryptography does is enable you to keep it hidden, but prove its authenticity. Mm-hmm. So it's an amazing, I think it's a technique that kind of breaks this tension, and therefore has huge applications, not just in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, but in the broader, in kind of the web. And I think there's, a ton of applications specifically around, just zooming out for a minute. Just think about it on the traditional web today, all this movement to like own your own data. And like, if you imagine if you could like interact with websites and basically prove you are someone without revealing who you are, right? Like that, it kind of enables you to protect like the data that's yours, but still access services that are personalized, right? And that's kind of the magical thing about this technology, and the reason why I'm really excited about it. Of course, there's a ton of use cases for it within the blockchain cryptocurrency space. We can talk about that next if you're interested, but I'll pause there.
Oh, please do continue. Like, I'm yeah, let's keep the narrative going.
Okay. So, in crypto, I think the two kind of ways that this is applied, or the two problems this is applied towards solving, or that this is aiming to solve, is privacy and scalability. Mm. I think cryptocurrencies, suffer today from the problem that everything is transparent by default, and there's no real way to hide transaction information. And I think it's, look, I think there are use cases where full transparency is a good thing. But I think for many use cases, like, you do want some degree of privacy. Like, for example, if let's just say we go out to dinner and and we split the check, or you take the check and I say, I'll pay you back later. I'm like, send me your ETH address and I'll send you some USDC or something. Right. Mm-hmm. And then now I have your address. I can send you USDC, but by having your address, I can see your entire contents of your bank account, basically, your entire transaction history for all time, and every wallet that's ever been associated with that address. Like, that's a crazy amount of information when you compare that to like Venmo, you know what I mean? Where it's like, all you have is like my Venmo hand. I guess you can kind of see other people I pay, but you definitely don't see like the contents of my bank account. You know what I mean? So,
right.
So I think it's kind of crazy when you think about applying crypto for like real world use cases like that. So privacy, I think, is just essential for if cryptocurrency is going to become an economy that scales, then I think you're going to need a solution there. And that's basically what zero knowledge cryptography gives you. And this is basically how Zcash came about. It's like, take Bitcoin and make it private. So it's like, I can prove that I paid Erica without revealing the details about my account. She doesn't have to know. I don't have to know anything about her account. She doesn't have to know anything about my account, but money moves anyway. Right. And that's much closer, if you think about it, to how the actual financial system works today. Now, I think I'm going to put a pin in this aspect of this, that some people look at that and say, hey, isn't that a very good thing for money launderers and criminals and terrorist financing? I'm going to pause. I'm going to put a pin in that, and we can come back to it, because I think the answer is not necessarily. And I think it's actually very good from a regulatory standpoint, but let's come back to that. Let me talk about the other area that zero knowledge cryptography is applied in blockchain, and that is scalability. So what a zero knowledge proof is fundamentally is it's some computation that you cryptographically, that you perform some kind of cryptographic magic on. And then out of it comes a proof that anyone can verify and be convinced that computation, whatever it was done correctly. Mm-hmm. And that proof is succinct, much more succinct than the computation itself, right? This is actually, if you've heard the acronym ZK SNARKs. Yeah. So ZK SNARK stands for zero knowledge, succinct, non-interactive argument of knowledge. It's very kind of a mouthful, but the succinct part comes from the fact that like there's some big computation and a small proof, or a smaller proof. And so people use that fact to say, okay, like look at Ethereum, it can only handle 15 transactions a second, for example, or whatever, 20. And like now let's take 1,000 transactions and then like put it in this paradigm and collapse it down to take these 1,000 transactions, collapse them down to a small proof, which could fit into a single Ethereum transaction. And now you have a roll up. So that's kind of how you can use this technology, not only to conceal, but also to compress. And that's how it enables scalability as well. Let me go back quickly since I mentioned it to the regulatory piece, because I think this always comes up. So I guess I might as well just address it.
Sure.
I think, again, I think for a real economy, you need privacy. And that's how the traditional banking system works today, is privacy by default. Of course, there are cases in which you want to reveal, or governments should have the ability to audit you. Mm-hmm. And that can still be achieved in this scheme, or in these schemes, by, through a couple of ways. One, you can define, for example, so let's take Aleo. Like you could theoretically, define a stable coin like USDC, a USDC type equivalent, and just make a rule, be like, okay, anyone on this sanctions list cannot send or receive Aleo USDC, right? Mm-hmm. And then people can transfer assets between each other. And again, because the nature of the cryptography, like the nature of the zero knowledge proof is cryptographic, the only way someone will be able to produce a proof is if they follow this rule effectively. It's just like a smart contract. You can't deviate from the smart contract just because of the cryptographic nature of a blockchain. In the same way, like you're kind of restricted to following just this, just this rule set. But the advantage here is it's fully private. So random individuals who are transacting with each other can't necessarily see, but a government or a bank can feel assured that the rules are actually being followed as they defined them. And so I think that's a really powerful compliance tool. And if you think about banks and how, I guess if you're comparing to the status quo of today, like most people may or may not know, big banks have enormous compliance departments. Mm-hmm. And the process in many cases is very manual. And often banks miss a huge amount of fraudulent activity. I mean, and why is this the case? Well, just like mafias exist, drugs exist, like all kinds of criminals operate world over. And if none of them could have access, if the banking regulation and compliance was perfect, none of them would be able to exist. But the fact is they all can. Yeah. And that's because it's actually an imperfect compliance regime. Mm-hmm. And in some ways it applying this paradigm of cryptography to that problem sort of forces people to transact in a way that's correct by construction and reduces both costs and increases efficiency. So.
Oh yeah. I think there is this public conception that the dark coins, the privacy coins are the dark coins. There is a bias, right? I don't know where that came from, but I mean, I think maybe there were some cases in the past where they're involved in some illegal activities, but as you said, in the real world, it's not much different. It's already happening. It's very prevalent. And, I don't know why that consumption happened in the first place, but I mean, even in the Korean market, I mean, all the, exchanges delisted the privacy coins, so-called, everything that's related to privacy. So it's been really I think the image, public image is a little bit, I don't know, it's a little wrong because the real world is already allowing all this to happen.
And it's interesting. If you look at people who get for example, in the US, there was a big controversy around the National Security Agency, not even wiretapping phones, but collecting metadata from phone calls and in an unauthorized way. And when people always tell me privacy is a problem in Web3, I why do you need privacy? If you're following the rules, why do you care? Well, go back to that case. Why not just publish the contents of every phone call or communication you ever make and share it to the government?
Yeah.
Why not? You're not doing anything wrong. Who cares? But if you put it to people that way, they're like, whoa, I don't know if that's a good idea. They freak out a little bit, right? And for obvious reasons, right? Because that's an invasion of your personal liberty. And in the same, but you can learn as much or more about a person from their finances as you can from what their phone calls are. So I don't know. To me, I think this is where the world is going, and this is way, and the ability, moreover, for like zero knowledge, getting back to zero knowledge proofs, I think you can construct a system that both increases the efficiency of compliance regimes, but protects people's personal liberty. So you really can have the best of both worlds, which is why I think it's an inevitability that this technology is going to be adopted.
Absolutely. Tell us more about Aleo. I think we can now focus on like what you're working on, like per se, and like what's so attractive about it. What are you trying to solve? Like there are many other projects that are out there in the ZK world, but so I just want to give you a chance to, like shine.
Shill a little bit. Yeah, sure. So first, I guess I should caveat, look, I've worked with, a bunch of these projects, or I know many of the folks in the industry, both through my time at A16Z, but also because I volunteer to help out sometimes on the Zero Knowledge podcast, which, by the way, all of you guys should subscribe to if you are not. It's a fantastic podcast by my friend Anna Rose.
Oh,
yep.
She's amazing.
She's amazing. So I kind of, through being friends with her and working with her some, I've met a lot of these other projects. And in general, I have to say, even though I'm going to describe Aleo and why it's great, I just want everyone to know, I think there's so much cool work happening in this ecosystem, and it's developing so quickly. So definitely subscribe to that podcast if you haven't. I think it's definitely one of my favorites in crypto.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let me talk. So the first thing, and I guess this is kind of adding on to what I just said, I firmly believe that the future of cryptocurrencies and blockchain it's going to be a multi-chain world. I think Aleo is amazing, and it's good. It's bringing kind of this unique technology to solve some unique problems, but I don't think it's the perfect thing for every application. And and again, I don't think any chain can make the claim that they are, right? And this is why I think the future is going to be multi-chain, where different kind of categories of applications kind of naturally gravitate towards different chains that make certain trade-offs at the technical level.
Yep.
So Aleo is therefore not an ETH killer. Aleo is not a Bitcoin killer. Aleo is not an anything killer. It is its own thing that I think, again, we're very proud of what we built, but I don't like to frame it in competitive terms, because I just think it's not useful. But all that said, let me tell you why it's special. So we're building privacy and scalability into this layer one from the ground up, right? And we kind of have the advantage of building a layer one protocol from the ground up in 2022. We have the advantage of experience of now 12 years of protocols that have tried to do this in various ways. And one of the things, for example, Ethereum, the on-chain execution model of Ethereum is very powerful in what it enables you to do, but it's very, very hard to get privacy in that model for a variety of reasons. Whereas in our scheme, we've sort of specially chosen the cryptographic primitives that kind of enable or make efficient having privacy at scale. And so, so what is Aleo? So again, there's a couple layers to it. So let me start at the bottom. So there's a layer one blockchain, and it's the Aleo blockchain. We sometimes also refer to it within the stack as SNARK OS, SNARK being the acronym for zero knowledge proofs that I mentioned earlier, and OS, for those of you who are non-technical, stands for operating system. So that's sort of that, the purpose of that blockchain is, as is most blockchains, having some data that persists over time that people can manipulate by sending transactions, right? And these are accounts effectively that users own, and they can send and receive assets, or there can be effectively the equivalent of a smart contract that people can interact with, and all that state is effectively tracked and kept on chain in a manner which preserves privacy. The other thing to note there that I think differentiates us from some other projects is we're not a proof of stake chain. We're doing a variant of a proof of work that is proof of succinct work, which basically makes the proof of work in Bitcoin, but takes it and makes it useful. And it's made useful by requiring the miners to compute zero knowledge proofs in the same way that a user needs to compute a proof to transact on the blockchain. A miner needs to compute a proof to mine a block. And so the purpose of this is to try and basically create an incentive to make this proof generation faster and better. And in Bitcoin, if Bitcoin miners can produce SHA-256 hashes 10 times faster, it doesn't really matter for an application because like there's not that many applications that require you to compute lots of SHA-256 hashes, right? Whereas in this case, it directly carries over because it's the same proof system. So the faster a miner can produce a proof, that could actually apply at any application in Aleo. So that's how the proof of work is useful. And we're really excited about that aspect of it. I think, okay, so that's SnarkOS, the blockchain. At the second level is what we call Snark VM, which is kind of this execution model, which differs a little bit from the Ethereum model in that most of the computation can be done off chain inside of a zero knowledge proof. And it's what we call we say this has unlimited runtime. And I guess just succinctly what that means is in Ethereum, you're limited by the types of programs you can run. Why? Because every block, there's 15 seconds between blocks, right? So whatever you're doing, it has to be done before 15 seconds. In actual fact, it's much less than 15 seconds, but you can't do things like, for example, like some, larger machine learning type computations, right? It's not going to end in time. Like the runtime is not enough between blocks. Whereas in this model, there is no, you can compute everything off chain over the course of many blocks. And then once the computation is done, a proof is created, you submit that as a transaction, and then the state is updated based on that. So that runtime it doesn't matter how much time exists between blocks because you're executing the program off chain. So it gives you much more flexibility as a developer to do different kinds of applications. Now we also have a mode where you can execute on chain. So it's similar to Ethereum where so it's like a little bit easier to reason about if you want to build like a Uniswap type application, you can take advantage of that where state has to be manipulated concurrently. But anyway, so that's the second level. And then kind of the third level is we've written our own smart contract language called Aleo, which basically is all about making zero knowledge proofs accessible to non-cryptographers, right? So maybe you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this all sounds cool. How do I get started? And then, until Leo, there really wasn't a good way except for learning cryptography and doing this, hand creating these proofs yourself. And with Leo, the idea is to build a language compiler that's formally verified and lets you take JavaScript or just basically a high level script that you will then can compile through Leo into stuff that's basically compatible or more or less in the format of a zero knowledge proof that then you can create transactions from. So this is effectively you can think of Leo as our smart contract language. And then on top of that, we have kind of the standard stuff, Block Explorer, wallet, IDE, place where you write programs, etc.
Wow. It's a full package.
Full stack. Yeah.
Full stack. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, there was a large, fundraising done and I can see why, because it does require a lot of, projects.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that for one. There was some recent, announcements on it. So super excited for what's about to come. Currently, what stage is the project in? Just curious, your team, what's the status quo at this point?
Yeah, so the project's been, we've been working on this so I joined the team about a year and a half ago. The team was working. I was the first non-founder to join. It was just after their seed round. Yep. So I didn't technically found this project. I joined just after they raised their seed, and I was the first non-founder. And so the company's been around for just over 2 years. We just concluded our second test net, which was an incentivized test net. And the plan is to run one more test net over the coming quarter and then launch our main net sometime in late Q3, early Q4. And then Aleo will be live and people can get their hands on it, play with Leo, deploy some contracts, and hopefully enjoy what hopefully will be a wealth of private applications on Aleo.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. So let's talk about the gaming. So there was the news that Aleo was partnering with Forte platform. Is that correct? Yeah. And, gaming, going into the gaming industry. So I think we can kind of link it to the practicality of how it can be used, who can use it. And just can you explain a bit further how this company can use Aleo in a better way? And that'd be really great to kind of do a run through the process. Yeah, sure.
So I can tell you a little bit about the Forte, what we do with Forte, and give an example of how we imagine Aleo could be used. In general, I think gaming is an amazing use case. What we do with Forte is kind of special in that it focuses mostly on scalability, a little bit less on the privacy aspect. But I think there's a huge genre that has barely been tapped of of on-chain games. And I think that most games that are entertaining or enjoyable involve hidden information. And so privacy is kind of a really key piece. Like poker, like for example, like I don't know what cards you're holding. You don't know what, you kind of like, that's the beauty. Sort of fun of it. It's the fun of it. It's the fun of it, right? Like chess, chess is an example of a game you don't have hidden information. We all see everything, but and that's fun too. But I think a lot of, you if that's all you can do, then it's not as fun. And frankly, like Ethereum, for example, or any blockchain that doesn't kind of have privacy natively, that's really what you're limited to. Now I shouldn't pick on Ethereum because actually they have a very cool project, which everybody should check out, by the way. It's called Dark Forest. Oof. And it uses, so Dark Forest. So it uses zero knowledge proofs. It's built on Ethereum. It's built by a great team of folks, a couple of ETH core devs, and folks from MIT. It's a really fun, very amazing game. I think that game is an example of what I think could be an entire genre of games. And so that's something that like, I hope other people get inspired to do, Dark Forest type games on Aleo, because I think it's just a really cool example of what you can do. But let me talk about Forte real quick. I think the Forte example, what we do for them is really kind of enable scalability in the way that I described the roll-up architecture earlier. And Forte is obviously a platform for blockchain gaming, and they kind of enable different ecosystems they enable multiple different ecosystems to be able to transact basically NFTs in game. And, one of the challenges with NFT transactions on Ethereum is that because of fees are high, it's hard. It kind of doesn't make sense to do a transaction with any NFT that isn't worth very much. Right. And when you're playing a game, like, let's pretend you're it's like an RPG and you're just starting, you have a new character and it's like your first sword, right? At some point you find a new sword and you're like, all right, I want to sell this first sword. Right. But your first sword is worth like $1, right? On it, in a blockchain where fees are very high, it doesn't make sense to sell the first. It's just like, it's not worth it. Right. And so that's the problem that we're kind of tackling with Forte is we're basically doing a roll up for their NFT transactions. So you're basically scaling and making those transactions cheaper such that, okay, these larger number of low cost items, it's economical for them to be transferred. So that's a little bit, that's kind of summarizing what we do with Forte. And it's something we're hoping to kind of expand to other companies and genres as well.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. The gaming industry is blooming, so especially in Korea too. So I think it's definitely worth looking into it. Oh, wow.
Korea is like the world leader in gaming. I think it's really cool. I think video gaming is such an exciting industry. Crypto, and I think crypto and gaming are just so made for each other. I'm so excited. It's been so cool. You've probably seen over the past year, like Axie Infinity and all these games, Dark Forest, like all these ideas where you've got like games plus DAOs plus markets. It's so cool. There's so many amazing opportunities just like waiting to happen there. I think it's just such an exciting space.
Oh yeah. It's going to bloom like more and more. So I'm very excited about what's to happen, but we can see bits of, the excitement already. So it's made to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about ZPrize, right? You said you were working on a side project, and I thought it was very interesting. I saw the website, and you're collaborating with amazing projects. Tell us more about this initiative.
Yeah, sure. So ZPrize is, it is, I guess it's affiliated with Aleo in the sense that I'm organizing it, but really, the idea is to be a collaborative. It's actually not an Aleo owned thing. It's a collaborative effort among, at this point, I think with 36 total now teams across the zero knowledge industry that are collaborating to accelerate basically these algorithms to make them practical. So you might, we've been talking about zero knowledge cryptography this whole time, and some of your listeners might be wondering, they're like, wow, it sounds so magical. Like, why aren't we all using this already? And the answer is that it's a new technology, and there's aspects of it that haven't been optimized yet. And so it's a little bit less efficient than we would want it to be. And, we have to go back and remember that there was a time on the internet where encryption actually wasn't very efficient either. Like, I'm maybe a little bit older. I was born in the 80s, and I remember when the internet came out, you didn't use HTTPS, or I guess I should say, when I remember when the browsers, first browsers came out, you never used HTTPS except when you were paying for stuff, and you had to wait. It took an extra long time for the HTTPS versus a regular website, which of course back in those days was slow anyway. But the point being, you paid a non-zero cost for that. And it was really only when you started having these cryptographic algorithms implemented at the level of hardware, like hardware instructions and Intel chips, for example, where it became, I mean, it's still, there was some overhead, but it was for the user, it was basically seamless and you never felt it. And now look at the web, like there are no HTTP only sites anymore. Basically everything is HTTPS by default. And that advanced, like putting those cryptographic instructions in hardware and optimizing it in that way really made that possible. So in the same way, that's the goal for the ZPrize. So ZPrize came from the idea, like, it's sort of modeled on the XPrize being the thing that like encouraged human spaceflight and stuff. So it's sort of the same model. There's a competition between teams. And the goal of the competition is to, accelerate these low level algorithms, which are not unique to Aleo or any of these individual, companies. They're kind of unique to the zero knowledge cryptography, like all of zero knowledge cryptography. So the goal is if we all collaborate and participate as a community and, sponsor prizes, which we already have $10 million worth of prize sponsorships lined up, we're hoping that incentive will bring the best teams from around the world together to then, produce like the foundation of what we can all build upon to enable like the next generation of zero knowledge applications. And I guess the one key thing here is that, the prize sponsorships, teams that win are going to earn this prize, but the caveat is that all of the work there is going to be open sourced. So all of this, none of this will belong to any project. It will all be a community public good that, again, everybody can use and benefit from in the future. So anyway, so that's something that we're really excited about. And that's been my personal focus over the last couple of weeks and will continue to be over the coming months. We're getting ready to make a big announcement about it in a couple of weeks. So your listeners are getting a preview. And then we're going to open up, we're opening up applications for competitors at that time. We're planning on launching the competition in early May, and then we're going to run it for a few months and then announce the results in August. And I think we're kind of planning on maybe doing a few other interesting things along the way, like maybe a hackathon, maybe some other stuff, but more details to follow on that. So,
wow.
And I was going to say, if folks are interested, you can follow along. ZPrize.io is the site. And that's probably the best place to keep tabs. There's going to be more places for folks to engage in a little bit, but for now, that's the best place to keep in touch with what's going on.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, that's an amazing initiative. As you said, chains are going to coexist together. And I think like by collaborating with other fellow projects in the same field or similar fields, I think it would really bring about more awareness and also, just more exposure. I think that the more, the better. And I think as the pie grows bigger, I think that's good for all of you guys. So I think, all of us too. So,
and I love, I mean, one of my favorite things about crypto is the aspect of community, right? Like there's, yes, like, of course, like we're all building protocols and, maybe someday it will, we'll all be fighting over, who's the best. But I think for now, I mean, look, I think there's so much more that unites us in terms of this belief in this technology and this paradigm that can really enable a better future. And I think that to me is what always excited me about being in the space more so than being in any other industry. And that to me, that's what I'm really trying to capture with the spirit of the ZPrize. This is, it's a community of projects and people focused around the singular goal to make this technology practical and bring it to the world and hopefully open people's eyes to it in a way that maybe they were never got a chance to see before. So.
Oh, great work that you're working on. This is great. So great vibes too.
Thanks.
Last question. I mean, you can just, I'd love to hear more, are there any exciting upcoming milestones for Aleo? And also like, what's your, I mean, I wouldn't say vision. I mean, it's too grand, I say, but like, what is your long-term goal in this space? And, I guess like it might relate to ZPrize too, but like, just curious about your personal endeavors as well, as long as for Aleo. So can you just share both of them? Yeah,
sure. So Aleo, I mean, I kind of mentioned already, like we have upcoming testnet 3 and then our mainnet launch. And I think that's honestly, that's a huge milestone that I'm really excited about. Of course, Aleo is more than just a protocol. It's also a company. And I didn't mention this earlier, but our Series B financing was actually kind of more focused on the company than the network. And that company is kind of going to be, will hopefully be like, the first services business built around providing like, zero knowledge proofs effectively. So that is, I think, beyond mainnet, we're excited to build that company and kind of enable access into this technology to scale it to millions or tens of millions of people. So that from the Aleo side is something we're excited about. Yeah, personally, I mean, I really love this technology, and it's been amazing watching zero knowledge cryptography evolve in the past 5 years since I learned about it. In 2016, a Zcash transaction took like a minute to generate on a laptop. And it was very, it wasn't very, all you could do was transfer money. You couldn't do anything else. There's a ton of pain points. And now you can do those transactions in milliseconds. You can do all kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be transaction, be any computation. There's not just one proof system. There's at this point probably dozens. Like it's in just 5 years, it's come so far that, and that's like one of the things, again, personally, I kind of hope that the ZPrize is a success, and I hope potentially it can be a model for, incentivizing public goods more broadly in crypto. I mean, of course, in the zero knowledge space, but in crypto too. So I think that for me is something I'm focused on. Of course, I didn't mention this aspect, but I'm a father of 3 kids. So Ooh. I want to get them into crypto and make sure they appreciate how cool it is. So maybe that's a personal goal as well.
Let's do something together. I have 2 kids, so we can do an education, crypto education, something initiative for the kids. I also want them to be on board and to learn slowly how this is working. And yeah, so it'd be really cool to collaborate on that.
I know. Well, it'll be funny. Watch, our kids will be like, we'll talk about zero knowledge cryptography 10 years from now, and they'll be like, Dad, that's like zero ZK crypto. That's really boomer stuff. Like, honestly, they'll be whatever. There'll be a new thing, and I won't know about it. So that's probably what's going to happen.
Looking forward to that phase.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I had such a wonderful time, and love to meet you all again in person too. But yeah, thanks so much.
Hopefully I can come to South Korea and meet the community there, and we can do that someday.
I will keep you updated on that. Thanks so much. Thank you.